everyone. Welcome back to the Shivering Mouse podcast. I'm so excited to have you back here today. Today we're going to continue along the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and we're continuing the last battle, chapter 7, mainly about dwarfs. The two collarman soldiers at the head of the column, seeing what they took for a Tarkin, or a great lord, with 2 armed pages, came to a halt, raised their spears in salute. "Oh, my master," said one of them, "we lead these mannikins to the collarmans to work in the mines of the Tisroc, may he live forever." "And by the great god Tash, they are very obedient," said Tyrion. Then, suddenly, he turned to the dwarves themselves. About 1 in 6 of them carried a torch that flickered light by which he could see their bearded faces, all looking at him with a grim and dogged expression. "Has the Tisroc fought a great battle, dwarves, and conquered your land?" he asked, "that thus you go patiently to die in the salt pits of Pergaram?" The 2 soldiers glared at him in surprise, but the dwarfs all answered, "Aslan's orders, Aslan's orders. He sold us, and what can we do against him?" Scoochie on back here. "Tisroc, indeed," added one and spat. "I'd like to see him try it." "Silence, dog," said the chief soldier. "Look," said Tyrion, pulling Puzzle forward into the light. "It has all been a lie. Aslan has not come to Narnia at all. You have been cheated by the ape. This is the thing that he brought out of the stable to show you. Look at it." What the dwarfs saw, now that they could see it close, was certainly enough to make them wonder how they had ever been taken in. The lion skin had got pretty untidy already during Puzzle's long imprisonment in the stable, and it had been knocked crooked during the journey through the dark wood. Most of it was in a big lump on one shoulder. The head, besides being pushed sideways, had somehow got very far back, so that anyone could see now his silly, gentle, donkeyish face gazing out of it. Some grass stuck out of the corner of his mouth, for he had been doing a little quiet nibbling as they brought him along, and he was muttering, "It wasn't my fault. I'm not clever. I never said I was." For 1 second all the dwarves were staring at Puzzle with wide-open mouths, and then one of the soldiers said sharply, "Are you mad, my master? What are you doing to the slaves?" And the other said, "Who are you?" Neither of their spears was at their salute now. Both were down and ready for action. "Give the password," said the chief soldier. "This is my password," said the king, and he drew his sword. "The light is dawning, and the lie is broken. Now guard thee, miscreant, for I am Tyrion of Narnia." He flew upon the chief soldier like lightning. Eustace, who had drawn his sword when he saw the king draw his, rushed at the other one. His face was deadly pale, but I wouldn't blame him for that, and he had the luck that beginners sometimes have. He forgot all that Tyrion had tried to teach him in the afternoon and slashed wildly, and indeed I'm not sure his eyes weren't shut, and suddenly found, to his great surprise, that the collarman lay dead at his feet, and though that was a great relief, it was at the moment rather frightening. The king's fight had lasted a second or two longer, and then he, too, had killed his man and shouted to Eustace, "Where are the other 2? But the dwarves had settled the 2 remaining collarmans. There was no enemy left. "Well struck, Eustace!" cried Tyrion, clapping him on the back. "Now, dwarves, you are free, and tomorrow I will lead you all to free Narnia. 3 cheers for Aslan!" But the result which followed was simply wretched. There was a feeble attempt from a few dwarves, about 5, which died away all at once. From several others there were just sulky growls, and many said nothing at all. "Don't they understand?" said Jill impatiently. "What's wrong with all you dwarves? Don't you hear what the king says? It's all over. The ape isn't going to rule Narnia any longer. Everyone can go back to an ordinary life. You can have fun again. Aren't you glad?" After a pause of nearly a minute, a not very nice-looking dwarf with a hair and beard as black as soot said, "And who might you be, missy?" "I'm Jill," she said, "the same Jill that rescued King Rilian from enchantment, and this is Eustace, who did it too, and we've come back from another world after hundreds of years. Aslan sent us." The dwarves all looked at one another with grins, sneering grins, not merry ones. "Well," said the black dwarf, whose name was Griffle, "I don't know how all of you feel, but I feel that I've heard about as much about Aslan as I want to for the rest of my life." That's right," growled the other dwarfs. "It's all a plant, all a blooming plant." "What do you mean?" said Tyrion. He had not been pale when he was fighting, but he was pale now. He had thought this was going to be a beautiful moment, but it was turning out to be more like a bad dream. "You must think we're bloomin' soft in the head, that you must," said Griffle. "We've been taken in once, and now you expect us to be taken in again in the next minute? We have no more use of stories about Aslan, see? Look at him, an old moke with long ears." "By heaven, you make me mad," said Tyrion. "Which of us said that that was Aslan? This was the ape's imitation of the real Aslan. Can't you understand?" "And you've got a better imitation, I suppose?" said Griffle. "No, thanks. We've been fooled once, and we're not going to be fooled again." "I have not!" said Tyrion angrily. "I serve the real Aslan." "Where is he? Who is he? Show him to us," said several dwarves. "Do you think I keep him in my wallet, you fools?" said Tyrion. "Who am I that I could make Aslan appear at my bidding? He's not a tame lion." The moment those words were out of his mouth, he realized that he had made a false move. The dwarves at once began repeating, "Not a tame lion, not a tame lion," in a jeering, sing-song way. "That's what the other lot kept on telling us," said one. "Do you mean you don't believe in the real Aslan?" said Jill. "But I've seen him, and he sent us two here out of a different world." "Ah," said Griffle with a broad smile, "so you say. They've taught you your stuff, all right. Saying your lessons, aren't you?" "Churl!" cried Tyrion. "Will you give the lady a lie to her very face?" "You keep a civil tongue in your head, mister," replied the dwarf. "I don't think we want any more kings, if you are Tyrion, which you don't look like him no more than we want any Aslans. We're going to go look after ourselves from now on and touch our caps to nobody, see?" "That's right," said the other dwarfs. "We're on our own now. No more Aslan, no more kings, no more silly stories about other worlds. The dwarves are for the dwarfs." And they began to fall into their places and to get ready for marching back to wherever they had come from. "You little beasts," said Eustace. "Aren't you even going to say thank you for being saved from the salt mines?" "Oh, we know all about that," said Griffle over his shoulder. "You wanted to make use of us. That's why you rescued us. You're playing some game of your own. Come on, you chaps." And the dwarf struck up the strange little marching song which goes with the drumbeat, and off they tramped into the darkness. Tyrion and his friends stared after him, and then he said the single word, "Come," and they continued their journey. They were a silent party. Puzzle felt himself to be still in disgrace, and also he didn't really quite understand what had happened. Jill, besides being disgusted with the dwarves, was very impressed with Eustace's victory over the Collarmans and felt almost shy. As for Eustace, his heart was still beating rather quickly. Tyrion and Jewel walked sadly together in the rear. The king had his arm on the unicorn's shoulder, and sometimes the unicorn nuzzled the king's cheek with his soft nose. They did not try to comfort one another with words. It wasn't very easy to think of anything to say that would be comforting. Tyrion had never dreamed that one of the results of the apes setting up a false Aslan would be to stop people from believing in the real one. He had felt quite sure that when the dwarfs were free they would rally to his side the moment he showed them they'd been deceived. And then, the next night, he would have led them to Stable Hill and shown Puzzle to all the creatures, and everyone would have turned against the ape, and, perhaps, after a scuffle with those Collarmans, the whole thing would have been over. But now, it seemed, he could count on nothing. How many Anarnians might turn the same way as the dwarves? "Somebody's coming after us, I think," said Puzzle suddenly. They stopped and listened, and sure enough, there was the thump-thump of small feet behind them. "Who goes there?" shouted the king. "Only me, sire," came a voice. "Me, Puggin the dwarf. I've only just managed to get away from the others. I'm on your side, sire, and on Aslan's, and if you can put a dwarfish sword in my fist, I'd gladly strike a blow on the right side before it's all done." Everyone crowded around him and welcomed him and praised him and slapped him on the back. Of course, one single dwarf could not make a very great difference, but it was somehow very cheering to have even one. The whole party brightened up, but Jill and Eustace didn't stay bright for very long, for they were now yawning their heads off and too tired to think about anything but bed. It was the coldest hour of the night, just before the dawn, that they got back to the tower. If there had been a meal ready for them, they would have been glad enough to eat, but the bother and delay of getting one together was not thought of. They drank from a stream, splashed their faces with water, and tumbled into their bunks, except for Puzzle and Jewel, who said they'd be more comfortable outside. This perhaps was just as well, for the unicorn and a fat, full-grown donkey indoors always make a place rather crowded. Narnian dwarfs, though less than 4 feet high, are, for their size, about the roughest, toughest, strongest creatures there are, so that Poggin, in spite of a heavy day and a late night, woke fully refreshed before any of the others. He at once took Jill's bow and went out and shot a couple of wood pigeons, and then he sat plucking them on the doorstep and chatting to Jewel and Puzzle. Puzzle looked and felt a good deal better that morning. Jewel, being a unicorn and therefore one of the noblest and most delicate of beasts, had been very kind to him, talking to him about the sort of things that they both understood, like grass and sugar and the care of one's hooves. When Jill and Eustace came out of the tower, yawning and rubbing their eyes at almost 10:30, The dwarf showed them where they could gather plenty of a Narnian weed called wild frenzy, which looks rather like our wood sorrel, but tastes a good deal nicer when cooked. It needs a little butter and pepper to make it perfect, but they didn't have these. So, what with one thing leading to another, they had the makings of a capital stew for breakfast or dinner, whichever one you choose to call it. Tyrion went a little further off into the woods with an axe and brought back some branches for fuel. While the meal was cooking, which seemed to take a very long time, especially as it smelled nicer and nicer the nearer it came to being done, the king found a complete dwarvish outfit for Poggin, a mail shirt, helmet, shield, sword, belt, and dagger. Then he inspected Eustace's sword and found that Eustace had put it back into the sheath, all messy from killing the collarman. He was scolded for that and made to clean and polish it. All this while Jill went to and fro, sometimes stirring the pot and sometimes looking out enviously at the donkey and the unicorn who were contentedly grazing. How many times that morning had she wished that she could eat grass? But when the meal came, everyone felt like it was worth waiting for, and there were second helpings all around. When everyone had eaten as much as he could, the 3 humans and the dwarf came and sat on the doorstep. The 4-footed ones lay down facing them. The dwarf, with permission from both Jill and from Tyrion, lit his pipe, and the king said, "Now, friend Poggin, you have more news of the enemy, belike, than we. Tell us all you know, and first, what tale do they tell of my escape?" "As cunning a tale, sire, as ever was devised," said Poggin. "It was the cat, Ginger, who told it. Most likely made it up, too. This Ginger, sire, oh, he's a sly boots if ever a cat was. Said he was walking past the tree to which those villains bound your majesty, and he said, saving your reverence, that you were howling and swearing and cursing Aslan. Language I wouldn't repeat were the words he used, looking ever so prim and proper, you know, the way a cat can when it pleases. And then, says Ginger, Aslan himself suddenly appeared in a flash of lightning and swallowed your majesty up at one mouthful. All the beasts trembled at this story, and some fainted right away. And of course the ape followed it up. There, he says, see what Aslan does to those who don't respect him? Let that be a warning to you all. And the poor creatures wailed and whined and said, it will, so that in the upshot your majesty's escape has not set them thinking whether you will have your loyal friends aid you, but only made them more afraid and more obedient to the ape." "What devilish policy," said Tyrion. "This Ginger, then, is close in the ape's counsels?" "It's more of a question by now," said sire, if the ape is in his counsels," replied the dwarf. "The ape has taken to drinking, you see. My belief is that the plot is now mostly arranged by Ginger or Rishta, that's the Kellerman captain. I think some words that Ginger has been scattering among the dwarves are chiefly to blame for the scurvy return they made you, and I'll tell you why. One of those dreadful midnight meetings had just broken up the night before last, and I'd gone a bit of the way home when I found I'd left my pipe behind. It was a real good one, an old favorite, so I went back for it. But before I got back to the place where I'd been sitting, it was black as pitch there, I heard a cat's voice say, mew, and a collarman voice say, here, speak softly. So I just stood as still as if I was frozen, and these 2 were Ginger and Rishta Tarkin, as they call him. Noble Tarkin, said the cat in that silky voice of his, I just wanted to know exactly what we both meant today about Aslan meaning no more than Tash. Doubtless, most sagacious of cats, says the other, you have perceived my meaning. You mean, said Ginger, that there's no such person as either. All who are enlightened know that, said the Tarkin. Then we can understand one another, pursed the cat. Do you, like me, grow weary of the ape? A stupid, greedy brute, says the other, but we must use him for the present. Thou and I must provide for all things in secret and make the ape do our will. And it would be better, wouldn't it, said Ginger, to let some of the more enlightened Narnians into our councils, one by one, as we find them apt, for the beasts who really believe in Aslan may turn at any moment, and will if the ape's folly betrays his secret. But those who care for neither Tash nor Aslan, but have only an eye to their own profit and such reward as the Tisroc may give them when Narnia is a Kellerman province, will be firm. Excellent cat, said the captain, but choose which ones carefully. While the dwarf had been speaking, the day seemed to have changed. It had been sunny when they sat down. Now Puzzle shivered, and Jules shifted his head uneasily. Jill looked up. It's clouding over, she said. And it's so cold, said Puzzle. Cold enough, by the lion, said Tyrion, blowing on his hands. And, what foul smell is this? Phew, gasped Eustace. It's like something dead. Is there a dead bird somewhere about? Why didn't we notice it before? With a great upheaval, Jules scrambled to his feet and pointed with his horns. "Look!" he cried. "Look at it! Look!" And then all 6 of them saw, and all over their faces came the expression of uttermost dismay. Well, that's quite a cliffhanger, C.S. Lewis. Goodness. Next week we do Chapter 8, What News the Eagle Brought. So thank you for tuning in today, and I'm terrible at promoting my website and everything like that, but you can find me at patreon.com/shiveringmouse or on Spotify and the Anchor podcast app. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful day.